Syria and other countries, and maybe Palestine also. But what I have to say that
well, 3 Muslim men, gunmen, killed 12 people in Paris, including 4 satirical cartoonists, journalists. And, well, first of all, I want to talk about this book that I wrote, which I've done a few other videos about, and the other video I made about the siege in Sydney, Muslim men killing those people in a public place. I said about the book that I'd written, and I didn't have the book with me, and one person made a comment on my YouTube channel, well, there is no book. Well, you know, I should have been interviewed about all of this already, because I wrote and published a 166-page book in 2006 about September 11th. Enough is enough analysis of September 11th, Afghanistan and Iraq. September 11th was done by the United States government, and they used Muslim men to try to put the blame onto them. And the book also goes through analysis of the Western politicians' interaction with Islamic groups and families, and their economic links as well, and in their impact, particularly in Afghanistan and Iraq subsequent to September 11th. Now, this event could have been prevented again, like the Sydney siege. It could have been prevented because the politicians need to deport male Muslim extremists and Muslim clerics from Western nations. They need to deport them from Western nations back to the Middle East. All Western nations need to deport male Muslim clerics, starting with the male Muslim clerics and the extremists, to set a message to the rest of the Islamic community that they can't engage violent attacks against Westerners. And if they had deported them, they could have prevented this, and they could have prevented all the other attacks. I wrote and published this book back in 2006. That's nearly 10 years ago. So they don't listen. And furthermore, the current politicians, if they don't deport these male Muslim extremists and the clerics, because the clerics are satanic teachers. Islam is a very violent and dangerous, satanic, misogynistic political ideology that seeks world dominion and to conquer Western nations. Now, if the Western politicians do not deport these male Muslim extremists and the clerics, the satanic teachers, then the politicians are helping them. And what the politicians will do, they will use these people to encourage and create civil war between Muslim men in Western nations and Westerners. So the politicians actually benefit from these sorts of attacks. They benefited from September 11th, they benefit from the Sydney siege attacks, and they benefit from these sorts of events because their approach is to come in with security forces and increase their control over the public to destroy the rights, freedoms and interests of the Western citizens in our Western nations. So it's to increase their own political control over the public, and the politicians are just as guilty and at fault for these events as the Muslim men involved. As I said, if they do not deport these Muslim extremists and clerics, then the Western politicians are actually helping them. And it's very evil. They're satanic politicians. What should have been happening all this time in the Western world, they should be teaching the New Testament in schools in all Western nations. Jesus Christ of the New Testament, which is promotes love and compassion and values, morals and values. And essentially the world is engaged in a war between two teams, the Jesus Christ of the New Testament team and Satan's team. And Muslim men are on Satan's team, and atheist men are on Satan's team. Now, I refer to men because men control the world's parliaments and judiciaries and the government positions. So most of these political and government commentators are all men, and above all what they do is they destroy the rights and lives of women. Women have no rights in this world anymore, and what needs to be heard is Christian women, the voice of Christian women, and also Christian women become politicians throughout the world to help the world and change the world for the better. That's the only way the world will change for the better, because a lot of this results from male power in the parliaments. Now, I've been criticised publicly that I hate men. That's not true. What I dislike is male power. I dislike male power, and I consider 50% of the world's men to be satanic, evil, violent men, and the other 50% of the world's men to be good men who must support women throughout the world. That is the only way that men will go to heaven in this world, is if they support the work of women, particularly Christian women, and take the side of women and Christian women to help the public and help the vulnerable people and the poor people in our world. And that's what that should work to do, because these satanic political and government men, they have failed so badly, and they have created a violent, satanic, evil world where violence dominates, and they need to remove themselves from the world's parliaments. If I take one example in Australia, or a couple of examples, Tony Abbott and Bill Shorten. Bill Shorten raped a woman, and I take the side of the victim, the woman victim who's fighting for her rights. So not only should Bill Shorten not be in the parliament, he should be in jail. Also, Tony Abbott deserves to be in jail. He appointed himself Minister for Women's Interests, which actually is the only position that he holds, because the position of Prime Minister has never been written into the Australian Constitution Act of 1900. I have a Royal Commission report from 1987 proving that, with commentators from Gough Whitlam, former High Court Judge Toohey, and a range of political and legal men and women who confirmed that from a Royal Commission, a Commonwealth Royal Commission report 1987. So, in fact, Tony Abbott, the only legitimate position he holds under the Constitution is Minister for Women's Interests. He appointed himself Minister for Women's Interests, so his male gender could continue to kill, rape, pedophile, enforce prostitution and sexual slavery of women and children. So for all Australian women who've been killed, raped, all Australian women who've been killed, I'll say that again, all Australian women and children who've been killed, raped, pedophiled, forced into sexual slavery and prostitution, Tony Abbott is guilty of all of those offences, and he deserves to be jailed for it. Pretty much the greatest political achievement of political men throughout history, if we look at the last 2,000 years since the time of Jesus Christ, the greatest political achievement is the destruction of women and children, and the satanic men who 99% of them will burn in hell. That's the judgment. None of this will ever change. This will continue. These acts will continue throughout Western nations because the politicians are assisting them. Unless they deport these extreme Muslim men and Muslim clerics who are satanic teachers, unless they deport them, then we have a right to say that the Western politicians are actually supporting the actions of these satanic men in the Western world to destroy the Western world, the rights of Westerners, and the ideologies, historical values, culture, freedom of speech, and ideologies and Christian values of Westerners and Western nations. Thank you.